The dawn of civilization. Primitive. Dangerous. Exciting. The handwriting is on the wall. If the human race is ever going to amount to anything, it needs
the most civilized caveman I have ever seen.
Look who's come out of his cave.
Thanks for tuning in. This is James from Cave Dweller Music. I have my co-host Brendan here as usual. And today we're joined by Hide Tepes from multiple acts, including Carrion MissFit Toys. Welcome on board. It's good to have you.
Yeah, thank you.
So I know that you hail from Norway, a country that's famous, obviously, for black metal. But it seems like, from what I've seen, there's a massively growing scene of other styles in the country, including industrial music. Did you want to tell us a little bit about sort of what the scene's like where you're from?
You know, people keep asking me that, like, what the scene is like, as if I would know. I mean, I live alone in the middle of the woods in a fairly, you know, it's not like it's only me, but it is more or less countryside. And the only thing I really know about any kind of scene is, like, there's maybe couple of metal bands here and there, play the same 2 or 3 clubs that are still in existence. So, like, there isn't really a whole lot, really. I mean, you know, I do know that there's some, like, noise, industrial, kind of more underground stuff going on, but it's fairly small.
Interesting. And whereabouts in Norway are you located?
West Coast.
Okay. So what's the closest sort of major city to where you are?
The closest would be Bergen.
Okay. All right. That's I'm a little bit familiar with that one.
Yeah.
So when you contribute to your bands and all that, do you do that remotely, or do you kind of meet with people, or how do you contribute if you're normally, like you said, living sort of on your own out in the countryside?
It kind of depends. I mean, if it's Carrion, then I just do that myself, because that was something that was started originally by just me, and then I just picked up a few people along the way, really. For MissFit Toys, they're based in Florida, so right now I'm obviously not able to go over there, but when I was there last year, it was very like I was living with Richie, the vocalist of the band, who's also the founder of that band. So we'd be working pretty collaboratively, just whenever we felt like it, really. Right now, we're not really doing anything with MissFit Toys at the moment. There will be something, but I don't really know when. And as for Carrion, that's mostly I will basically create the foundations of something, and then I'll send that to the other 2 guys, who will then add in their contributions, and we just take it from there.
Okay. Nice. So basically, for anyone who's listening who doesn't really know either of your projects,
Mm-hmm.
Why don't you tell us a little bit about Carrion and the project's history and what you guys play?
Right. Carrion was something I started in, I think, 2013, maybe even before that. I really don't know. But it kind of came about from that I've always played in bands. I was always trying to start bands, but I kept running into this issue of that I grew up in a really small place. It's that kind of cliche story where you're like the only weirdo, and it's no point in even telling that story, because I'm pretty sure we all know how that story goes. But so I tried starting all these bands, and I was into bands like, I was really into like 80s rock, like Wasp and Motley Crue and all that shit, but at the same time I was into like punk and black metal and all that. So that's the kind of stuff I would be trying to play. But the people that I'd start all these bands with, this is when I was like 13, 14, and everyone was into like pop punk and metalcore and all this kind of stuff. So that didn't really work out, and I just accidentally stumbled into industrial, finding bands like No Boughton or Nine Inch Nails or Ministry, or even like the first wave of industrial, like Coil and Throbbing Gristle, and just kind of being really fascinated with, I guess, just the overall experimental nature of it, how you can literally make music, or at least sounds, out of anything, and also the fact that it didn't require other people. So with all these bands that I had been with, it was always the case of like, I'd start as a bassist and then suddenly I'd be playing guitar or drums, or so I already had a little bit of knowledge, kinda knew how to play a little bit of everything. So, I just started exploring this like industrial electronic music kind of thing, and tried to teach myself how to do that, how to use like a digital audio workstation. So, software and programming music and that kind of thing. And I guess Carrion came out of just experimenting with that. But, I always, I listened to rock and metal, and that's the kind of stuff that I wanted to play. And so I kind of started moving away from the whole electronic thing and kind of pulling more from the more experimental and avant-garde parts of industrial, and mixing in more of the rock and metal sides of things, and just creating this weird little hybrid.
Yeah, I kind of think, this is my take on it at least, but when I reviewed the album that you released back in January, which was Testament Ov The Exiled, the revised edition, I kind of picked up some of those metal influences you're talking about, like, this may just be me, but I thought there was a sort of black metal tinge to it in the production and the rawness of the actual sound. Because a lot of the time I find with industrial music, you kind of get a sort of crisp cleanness to the actual sound quality. The elements might be harsh, but the actual audio quality is kind of overproduced a lot of the time. But your music, I like the fact that it was sort of, there was a rawness to the actual audio quality itself, which is something you don't really see a lot in your genre, at least not that I see very often.
Yeah, the funny thing about that, though, is, first of all, that's not something that is done purposely. Like, I'm not sitting here with high-end production gear and then trying to make something sound, I guess, more raw than what it really does. Like, that's just a result of the fact that I'm broke. I can't afford all these fucking things. I can't afford, $20,000 studios or producers or anything. Like, everything that I do is very DIY. It's very rooted in that punk ideology, because that's the kind of stuff that I grew up listening to. But, as far as like industrial, or rather the way industrial is today, I don't really like seeing that as industrial, because it kind of seems like it's become just dance music. It's just dark EBM. But when I think of industrial, what I think of is like Coil and Throbbing Gristle and very, very experimental. Well, they would call it anti-music, which is what they did call it back then. And the entire point of industrial was to break down, I guess, the barriers and traditions and limitations of what was considered music, like conventional music. And it's just, I don't know, I just kind of find it baffling that something that began as this very, in many ways, a very extremist thing, kind of just evolved or devolved into pristine little dance songs.
Right. To some extent, I kind of think the noise scene, like the harsh noise scene and the noise scene, have kind of taken the mantle that you're talking about of being anti-music with the harshness and, the whole DIY quality to it.
Well, you could say that, but, I can also say that, like I can criticize the noise scene for the same thing. When that started, there was more of a point to it. There was like a very clear agenda, like, here's what we're trying to do, here's why we're doing it. And now, not unlike the black metal scene, it's kind of just overrun with distorted microwave sounds that have no fucking meaning. It's completely fucking shallow. And a bunch of, I don't know, wannabe Nazis and misogynism, which, you know, it's just funny because like a lot of what's like, say someone like Throbbing Gristle, you know, like Genesis P-Orridge wasn't, you know, that wasn't a person who was conventional by any standards, whether it be conforming to gender roles or in terms of the music they made or anything. So it's kind of weird that such what I don't know, like I guess you can call it a LGBTQ icon, I suppose, you know, someone who came from like a counterculture and makes this music, and then that music gets taken and used in a completely opposite agenda.
Right.
So I don't know. I mean, you know, it's not every noise artist, but like I will listen to like noise and power electronics and things like that. And there are still interesting things happening in that scene, but a lot of it is unfortunately kind of overrun with all this just politics and bullshit.
It's become one of those things where a lot of bands sort of incorporate elements of it more often than not. And I think you're kind of right to some extent that the scene itself with the hardcore, this is just that stuff, has become a bit weird. I don't know if you heard about a band last year called, it was Duma. Did you hear about their album last year, self-titled? They're from, they're actually an African band from Kenya.
Yeah, no, I haven't heard of it.
It's really interesting stuff. I'll send you a link after the interview.
Yeah.
To see what you think of it. But it was one of my albums of the year. They took ethnographic recordings, so actual like African ethnographic recordings, mixed it with harsh noise, power electronics, and grindcore. But they kept all the tribal influences. So you have like all the tribal drums, African rhythms, and then all those interesting recordings. So yeah, I think that for me was a really cool example of a fresh take on that style of music and on that scene.
Yeah, you know, there are people that will do stuff like that is still interesting, but a lot of people kind of seem to take it a little too literally.
Yeah, just noise.
Just literal fucking noise. Like it is absolutely like it is actually just you could record your microwave for like an hour, pull it into some fucking like distortion effect on your laptop and call it a day.
Right, and then that runs 36 minutes, and that's the album.
Yeah. Like that's not really that interesting or thought-provoking or anything.
Brendan, I know that I only introduced you really to Carrion this week before the interview. Did you have any thoughts you wanted to sort of share on your take on the music?
I thought it was great. The first kind of intro kind of reminded me of like some like alien spaceship kind of taking off in a way, like preparing for takeoff. And then the album just like kept going, went like kind of like real dark, and I'd have to say it was just really dark, man. Reminded me of being I don't know, just like in like a prison cell or something by myself forever, like and then like having like all these aliens like coming around me, like especially like I don't know, the end of the album too was really good. Like it was awesome, man. It was I love the what was it? The third song had like a real kind of like almost a 1990s like amazing like just vibe to it that was like it's had me like fist pumping in the air like yeah, all right, let's go. And then yeah, it was good, man.
I can't even remember what the third song is. Oh yeah, putting tape over Martyrs' mouths. Yeah.
And then right after that, it was like more like kind of the spaceship of this like alien vessel that's like lifted me off the ground. It's freaking cool.
Yeah, really thank you. Those like the intro interlude kind of things, like the shorter instrumental things, that's like a lot of those things are made by Sam, who's one of the other members. He just goes around and records things just on his phone, just field recordings, and sends it to me, and I'll manipulate it further. And it's funny that you mentioned this like alien environment, because for that album I kind of started bringing in using modular synths a little bit, which might look a little bit like a spaceship to a lot of people, because it does, it's just like blinking lights and cables and weird shit everywhere.
That third track that Brendan mentioned, the putting tape over Martyrs' mouth, that was the one you made the music video for, wasn't it? It had Eddie LaFlash.
Yeah, from Decent News.
Which was you remixed one? I think it was Blood of Saints. You did like 3 remixes on the re-release.
Yeah, we did. I had my friends in Decent News, Vanity Kills, and Dead Agent. They all did a remix of The Blood of Saints. And then I did like a alternate version of To Eat Crow. And and there was, I guess, like a new bonus song thing called Dogs of Hell.
That's the one. It's kind of funny. We were actually interviewing Raymond Watts. I don't know if you know who he is. He's a guy from Peg and Cam FDM. Yeah. He was on the show last week. We were interviewing him, and I actually talked about your album with him, about that remix, the remix versions of that song. Told him to go check them out because I thought it was awesome how different all 3 of those remixes sounded from the original. It was almost like 4 entirely different songs made from the same song, which I thought that was like, people try and do it, but you guys did it really well.
That's what I like. I'll do remixes sometimes, and when I think I do know that there are other people who do it this way. Like, I'm definitely not a pioneer, but whenever I have someone wanting me to do a remix, I only ever want the vocals. And what I'll do is I'll listen to the original song, kind of get a feel for that, and then I'll take the vocals and kind of build something new around it. Sometimes I'll consider things like, is the original song a ballad? Is it like a more fast-paced thing? Like, what kind of atmosphere is it? And I'd try to kind of turn that upside down a little bit, or manipulate it in a way so that maybe you see things from a different level. Maybe I'll consider like, what's the lyrical content? So when we set out to do the remixes for The Blood of Saints, I'm pretty sure I only provided the vocal tracks for it. And each of these artists who did it, like Decent News, they do like this industrial rock thing, I guess. Vanity Kills is kind of like a dirty, gritty kind of punk rock thing, but with synths. And Dead Agent is more of almost like an EBM type of thing, which isn't the kind of music I listen to at all. But I like the Dead Agent stuff because I just like the way that he does that. Like, he does it in a way that's more interesting than just a simple, like, 4 on the floor and repetitive fucking synth lines and, the usual shit.
Yeah, that was a really interesting mix of it, the EBM one. I remember actually listening to that one a second time. Because it came up because we were talking about, with Raymond Watts, talking about remixes of industrial music, and he was actually talking about the concept of, on his website, maybe like putting up a bunch of his songs and just saying, have at it, here's the bass files, remix it and send it to me. Which I think is kind of a cool concept for, it's a cool idea for bands to do that, because I'd love to hear your take on one of his songs if it does end up happening. It'd be interesting to see that.
I've thought about doing stuff like that too. And Dead Agent, who did one of those remixes of The Blood of Saints, he did that not too long ago. He just put up the files for, I think it was like an EP or an album or something, and he had everyone just do a remix, and then he released it as an album where he gave the profits to some kind of charity thing. I think it was the ACLU or something.
Wow. That's actually really cool.
Did pretty well too, and raised a decent amount of money. Yeah.
That's awesome. I'm going to have to check that out. Is that on his Bandcamp?
Yeah, it should be. I think it's called The Distribution of Power.
Okay.
Yeah, it's something like
Awesome.
that. And there's like a fuck ton of songs on there. I think I did 2 remixes on that album, which I did under the name From the Mouth of Belial. I know it's called Distribution of Power, and it has like 26 songs, and it's all just remixes by pretty much anyone who felt like doing it. Yeah,
That's a cool concept. Speaking of those bands and the remixes, Vanity Kills, that is Joe Crow, isn't it? That's
Yes.
his project. The other member of Carrion.
He, I guess it's sort of a similar situation to Carrion, really, where, you know, I started Carrion on my own and have had people in and out through the years. Same thing with Joe and with Vanity Kills. You know, it's like he started it, he does most of the production, and, you know, just picks up people here and there.
It's kind of cool that you guys have teamed up for.
Yeah, you know, we've known each other for a while, and I like doing interviews and stuff recently. Like after he joined, you know, people will ask like, "Well, how did you meet?" I don't fucking know. I can't remember it. Like he's just been around forever, I guess, and you know, we've just like talked here and there, done little things together, like did some remix stuff for him, or you know, just stuff like that. And it actually only started out with that I had another member, and wasn't really working out, and I needed to just get some recordings done. And for whatever reason, I thought of Joe, so I messaged him and I was like, "Hey, can you do this thing?" And he did it. And I think like the same day we ended up having like a video chat on Facebook, and you just kind of, you know, talked for a couple hours about like him joining the band and like what that would entail, and you know, all that kind of thing. It happened pretty fast, pretty like kind of like just in an organic way. It wasn't really what I had in mind when I had first asked him to do the recordings. That was more I needed someone to do it, and I knew that he, you know, seemed like a reliable guy. So I asked him. Here we are.
And the album, the most recent one we just talking about, came out on Brutal Resonance Records. Those guys are fantastic. Put out some really cool stuff. Did you reach out to them, or did they contact you with that one?
They have. They've just kind of been someone that I've had contact with somewhat consistently for a while. You know, I would always just do the usual thing, like sending press releases and whatever, and you know, they'd always just help out in whatever way they could. And I remember when they first announced that they were doing the label thing, I emailed them and I was, you know, just like congratulate them, and I just kind of mentioned like, you know, if you would be interested in anything, then let me know. At the time, though, like this was when they had just started the label, so it wasn't like they wanted to take on too much right away. So, you know, I just didn't push the matter. And then a little bit of time goes by, and they, I think they posted on Facebook or something that they had some openings. So I just sent them an email again, you know, like, "Hey, you had an opening. Here's what I got going on right now. Let me know if you're interested." And yeah, they got back to me, and here we are.
That's great. Those guys, they put out some really cool stuff. They were they a review site or a PR firm before that? I think it was PR, wasn't it? Before the label.
Brutal Resonance. Yeah, before the label, it was. I mean, it still is a magazine or online magazine or whatever you want to call that. It's a website. I don't know.
Yeah, they just promote music and cover music news and all that stuff.
Yeah, you know, they post news and they do interviews and reviews, and it's kind of like what you do, but just imagine that you also had a label.
So what's the other project that you're involved in? We've been talking about Carrion with MissFit Toys. How did you sort of come to be with a band that is based in Florida?
I think it started out with, now, I guess the industrial scene globally is pretty small. Like everyone either knows each other or knows of each other. So, I had heard the name MissFit Toys. I sort of knew that it was a band, hadn't really listened to it. And I guess, I think it started with that I messaged Richie, the vocalist, and just asked if he'd be interested in doing a remix for a Carrion album. And, we just kind of kept talking. At the time, he wasn't able to do the remix, but we kept in touch, and we just kind of discovered that we had there's a lot of common ground, just as far as how we see music and industrial and just all of these little things, I guess, that we could kind of connect over. And they recently, I guess, lost or got rid of, whatever it may have been, their previous synth and keyboard player. So I just kind of, just told him, like, well, I know how to do those things, so I'm also able to travel. Now, the interesting thing here is that around the same time that we started talking about me joining the band, I also got together with who's now my girlfriend, who lived in Tampa in Florida. So both of these things kind of happened at the same time, and it kind of looked like, whether I joined this band or not, it seems like I'll be going to Florida either way. And, Tampa isn't that far from Orlando. So, it just kind of, it's just kind of all worked out at the same time. And so I went over there. We had some rehearsals. It went pretty well. Then after a while, I just moved in with Richie. We started working on some new music. We released a single called Blythe Din, as well as kind of like a reworked version of an older song called Words Unsaid. We did some stuff which is intended for a new album. So yeah, things just kind of worked out.
That Blythe Din, is that the title of the latest release that has all the remixes?
Yeah, that would be. It was released as it has the song itself, Blythe Din, and then it has a bunch of remixes by friends of ours. Friends of mine, friends of MissFit Toys.
Yeah, see, decent.
That was a fun album. I listened to that today. I listened to that twice today. It reminded me of like happy music with just really dark, great vocals. I was like, all right, man. I feel like I was at a dance party that I always wanted to be at, but I could never. I don't know. They didn't.
Yeah, I remember just sitting outside Richie's house, writing the lyrics to that song. I mean, Richie wrote the lyrics to it. I'm not gonna say that I did it, but the chorus of that song, I can't remember what it says anymore, but I remember me and Richie sitting outside one day and just translating old Hebrew prayers or something to use for the chorus, and just trying to make sure that, getting the message through, the message that he wanted to get through with that song, but also, I don't know, correct grammar, but in Hebrew, which none of us speak Hebrew. So yeah, it's just one of those weird little things that happen sometimes.
What made you pick Hebrew prayers? How did that come to mind? How did that sort of come to mind, the idea of doing that?
I guess it just, really, you'd have to ask Richie about this, but Richie's a Christian, and one of the big reasons that I offered to join MissFit Toys was the fact that there's a lot of bands that make, I guess, similar music to that, where it is, I guess, a little more on the throw dancey kind of style. And, a lot of the time it doesn't seem like they really put that much into it. But through talking to Richie before offering to come over and play with them, I discovered that, so we have a lot of common ground, but we also have a lot of similarities in the way that we do things, like the way that he thinks about artwork or lyrics or even just constructing the music itself. Like everything is done very purposely. It's not the case of like using a pentagram for shock value or anything like that. Like anything that's there, it always has a reason to be there. It isn't just done like for fun, I guess. So, a lot of the fact that he is religious probably does play a part into, I would imagine, especially lyrical content and the fact that that particular song had Hebrew prayers in it.
And Black Den, you said from an upcoming album. Is that the one that's called The Nine that will be coming out sometime in the future?
Last I heard, it was being mixed or mastered. I can't remember which one. But there's no release date or anything like that right now. I did the artwork for Blythe Den, and plan is that I'm also going to do the artwork for the album itself. So at some point, me and Richie are just going to have to have a conversation about, what direction that we want to take the artwork into as well, because both of us kind of have this view that the art is just as important as the music. Like when you pick up the CD or you just see, like the cover art, it should be some kind of representation of the album, both musically and lyrically, and kind of be this like image of what it sounds like, I guess.
Right. No, that totally makes sense.
I think all the music is done, though.
I think
we did get a lot done when I was there, and the rest of the guys in that band kept working on it after I got back to Norway. So yeah, like that hasn't really been all that affected by everything else.
And are you going to reach out again, do you think, to Brutal Resonance for that one, or are you going to go
I think that's just going to stay independent. I wasn't even really planning on doing anything with the label, but it just so happened that it was Brutal Resonance, and I knew those guys from before. I knew there wouldn't be any of the because they hear a lot of horror stories, about bands that sign to labels and then they lose creative control, and there's these schedules and it just fucking sucks the joy out of it. And I knew that wouldn't happen with Brutal Resonance. And I was already, before I knew that they would have an opening for the label, I was already kind of playing around with the idea of doing like a special edition type of release with like bonus material and all that. So that was already something I was planning on doing. So when they got back to me and were like, yeah, we want to do this thing with you, I already had pretty much everything ready. Like I had the artwork, I had a fully fledged idea. I might have already started the music video. Not really sure on that, but like most of the stuff that came out after signing to them, I was already working on before that was even a thing. So that just, okay. It's kind of the same with like joining MissFit Toys, and stuff just falls into place.
Brendan, I know that you have some questions that you would like to ask, so I'll let you fire off those ones.
Since we're doing remixes, we've talked about them. who would you want to remix your favorite album? And like, if you could do that album with them, like, you know, who would you like to collaborate with?
Just any album,
remix,
like any album that's ever released.
Or well, you're like one of your favorite. Yeah, it could be anything you wanted to listen to.
That's a hard question.
You can answer it in two parts if you want. Who would you like to work with, and then maybe an album as well.
Like Trent Reznor or something. Just because, I mean, yeah, sure, yeah, I'm like a huge fucking Nine Inch Nails fan, but just because of, I don't know, he just has a weird kind of unconventional work method, it seems. Like he's always coming up with these weird ways of doing things and interesting sounds. So that might be one. Another one would be, I guess, more like an underground artist would be a friend of mine who's a modular artist who releases all these modular albums under the name Black Moth, just because it's this weird thing where we kind of, we have the same idea, but kind of, we don't necessarily have the same execution of it. So just doing something with him and seeing what happens if we put both of us together could be an interesting thing, which is actually almost something that we are working on. It's not a remix album. It's more of like a collaboration split type of thing, which will, I guess more details about that will be posted at some point later this month.
If you could open for anybody, be the opening act for a big name or like one of your favorite artists, who would that be?
Probably Wasp, which would go so fucking terribly. Like I don't think that the audience that goes to a Wasp show would be very accepting of what we do. But fuck it, it'd be fun for me because like that's the music that I was listening to when I was starting my first few bands, you know. So I don't really care if it was. I mean, we could get booed off stage and we could have like fucking bottles of piss thrown at us. I don't fucking care. It'd still be great because I still got to open for Wasp.
Brendan, just before you ask the next one, I just have a question to ask based on that one.
Yeah.
So of the shows that you've been to, like concerts you've been to, what was the weirdest pairing that you've seen, like opening artists with like an act that followed them that made no sense?
I mean, when I was in Florida, I went to see Martyrs, and Martyrs was the headliner, and one of the opening acts was a band called Tomb, which are friends of mine. It's more of like a noise kind of thing, and I guess I could see how that works, but the very first band was, I can't fucking remember the name. It was probably just like a local act or something, but it was just this one guy, and I think he tried to act like a vampire, and it was just really weird and cheesy, and I think he was supposed to be doing some kind of like gothy kind of post-punk thing. But it wasn't even a band. It was just like one dude and a microphone. And he was saying all this weird shit about vampires. And he just, I don't know. It was like he was just trying really fucking hard to be this goth kid. And I don't know. I think I physically cringed.
Brendan, what about you for that question? What's the weirdest gig you've been to that, like, as far as lineups go? Do you want me to answer mine so you have a minute to think?
Yeah.
I've got two. So one was the first time I saw Black Sabbath. The band that was supporting was She Had.
No.
Have either of you guys heard of She Had?
No.
They're a New Zealand band, but they're like alternative rock, and they play on the radio and stuff. It was a very weird choice to put them with Black Sabbath. Not even vaguely the same music whatsoever. That was just a weird pairing. But the weirdest one overall would have to be I saw Obituary. The death metal band, and and the opening act for them was just two dudes, one guy with the drum kit and one guy with the guitar, and they just played like a punk grindcore blend that was a comedy act, This was in Australia, and they're both wearing mankinis, like from Borat. You know, the one piece under swimsuit from Borat. And all their songs were just joke songs, and it was just those two dudes playing for like 45 minutes before Obituary, before Wormrock played for Obituary. But it made absolutely no sense at all that they opened for it. It was super
we did
weird.
a MissFit Toys show where we did have a stand-up comedian opening. Yep. And I think he had a ukulele and a fedora and a Hawaiian shirt. That's all I remember anything from what his show was about. I just remember the way he was dressed and that he had a ukulele, and thinking that it's really weird having a stand-up comic opening a music show, which, to make it weirder, because, you know, okay, so you mentioned Obituary, right? And Florida used to be very, you know, like death metal capital. And apparently that's still a thing, but the quality has just sunken considerably low. And so the show that we're playing, it's like we are the only kind of industrial band. And then there's this stand-up comic, and there's, you know, those bands that just consists of like, there's like a 50-year-old guy and he's got a cowboy hat and he's trying to be like Motley Crue, just living out his teenage dream. Like, just the strangest combination of things. And I was part of that, I guess.
That's awesome. How did the audience react to the stand-up? Like, were they
know
like, what is happening, or did they kind of get into it?
A whole lot of audience was present for that, because I think that was maybe, if not the first act, it might have been the second, but it was pretty early. And, you know, it's the typical thing of people don't really show up until later in the night. So I think at that point, it was just the bands that were playing and the people working at the venue.
Brendan, you got yours?
So I brought my wife to go see Earthless, and it was I want to say Venom Sabathi was the other band, and the opener we were like was Maggot Heart, or no, Maggot Heart was the middle band. So yeah, it was just a little different though, because like she was just so
rock and roll, my dude.
Much more aggressive and abrasive than like these. Yeah, not rock. I felt like it wasn't rock and roll compared to like, you know, the other two bands, which were like, you know, rock and roll. You know what I mean? Like, I felt like it was just out of place. I liked it. I was just like, wow. It was just, I don't know. It just didn't quite fit the bill, but it was good. It was still a good show. I remembered it. You know, like it was right before. I think it was in November I saw it, right? You know, in 2019. So it was just before all the shit hit the fan.
Yeah, that Obituary gig that I was talking about was actually the last live show I saw before everything kind of fell apart.
At least you got to see Obituary, though.
Yeah, my last show was Ohm.
I didn't see this necessarily as it happened.
Yeah, nice.
But, you know, I'd watch MTV and VH1 and stuff as a child. And, like, you know, in my childhood, early teens, whatever, and they would do a lot of these reruns of, like, the Nirvana Unplugged and all that. And I was never really into the 90s. Like, I'm into, like, 60s, 70s, 80s for the most part. When it comes to the 90s, I kind of cut off. There's a few things here and there in the 90s that I will be into, but it's, I don't know. You know, if someone asks me like what decade of music I'm into, I'm not very likely to point out the 90s really, unless it's to be like, oh, the Downward Spiral.
The 90s was a very weird time musically. Like the only thing I really take from the 90s is the early 90s, like old school death metal scene. But apart from that, there wasn't really a lot of great stuff going on.
That's when like the first mashup started too, with that Judgment Night soundtrack, when they had hip hop artists and you know, metal bands and you know, just do out like songs together. Like it was pretty cool. 90s was starting some neat stuff.
No, it's I mean, there was some interesting stuff going as well, but it was also a really weird time. Like new metal was a very weird time in general.
It's still weird. I never got into that
time for metal.
It's still weird.
Metal corn thing. If you want to count Dope as a new metal album or a band, then I guess that would be the only thing. But to me, they were more of like just a rock metal, industrially kind of thing, really. Like, especially if you compare it to something like Korn, you know? Yeah, no, the 90s is not my favorite decade. There's like Nine Inch Nails and Ministry and obviously the death metal and the black metal stuff that happened then. But I think a big part of why I'm so more drawn to like the 80s specifically is because in the 80s you had, you kind of get the first, like the beginnings of what became black and death metal, but at the same time you have like goth and post-punk, and then you have, the 80s was when pop music was like dead or alive with Pete Burns, like pop music wasn't bad in the 80s. But then you also have like the metal stuff, like the thrashy kind of thing, and Metallica and Megadeth and all that shit. And just so much better. Yeah, just so much variation in one decade.
Yeah, I think you're right. Things really did, like from like 80 through to 90 progressed a lot, like musically. There's a lot of new genres that came into existence, a lot of new sounds. I agree with you with that, like post punk stuff. I absolutely love that, the 80s post-punk stuff.
Yeah, like that's a lot of what I listen to is that kind of thing. It's like I'll go from Morbid Angel to Sisters of Mercy or Fields of Nephilim or, that whole like Batcave scene kind of thing.
What's your favorite music besides like something outside of your normal listening? Music that you like, you play music that you like, but like, is there something that you like that you listen to? You were like, I'm not gonna play music like this. I just
like old country. Yes, old country. None of this like radio like pop stuff? Shit. None of that crap. Like Hank Williams Sr. or Waylon Jennings or Johnny Cash, even. Yeah, like country gets a lot of shit, but.
Yeah, that's
anytime someone's like, posting like a meme about how crappy country is, I'm always just thinking, oh, you've only heard that shit on the radio, haven't you? All this like outlaw country stuff.
Yep.
It's just a dude telling stories about, robbing banks, being drunk, getting his heart broken, wanting to fucking die. Like, what's so bad about that? I mean, yeah, there's a bit of yodeling sometimes, but, whatever.
I'm in the same boat as you. I love that old stuff. I was one of those people for a long time who kind of wrote the whole genre of country music off because I'd only really heard the stuff on the radio. I was one of those people. But then I actually decided to investigate the genre, and there's a lot of really good subgenres of country. Like you said, the classic outlaw stuff, that stuff's awesome. And then you got like all the dark country and gothic country stuff, and that stuff's also awesome. Yeah.
Oh my God, James! What was the name of that band you got me into?
The one that had the bluegrass influences as well.
Yeah, I think so.
Butchers and the Builders.
Yeah. That was some good stuff.
Would you say it's like kind of in the same category as something like Those Poor Bastards or something?
Yeah. It's along those lines. It's like a very like bluesy, folky type thing.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't heard that specifically, but I have heard stuff like Those Poor Bastards and Sons of Perdition and all that.
Whole song about like drowning in a lake and.
Yeah, it's kind of along those lines. I think it's a little bit folkier, maybe. But it's that type of stuff. Same as like what's that band called? There's one that was really big that did that song, Black Soul Choir, 16 horsepower or something like that. Yeah, me too. That stuff's great. Good, awesome band. That's another genre people write off, like the whole folky bluegrass stuff. There's some really good stuff in there as well.
People see the country name and think of, I don't know if this is a real artist, like a real radio country artist, but I feel like there is someone called Luke Evans. Yeah. They probably just think of like that kind of thing.
Yeah. Yes, there is. Yep.
But, like when I was growing up, like my stepdad would listen to a lot of like Alan Jackson and that kind of shit.
They're like real
and so, I always heard that kind of country and wasn't like super into it. And I don't even know how I ended up there, really. I guess one day I just started researching country music, and I mean, Johnny Cash was playing when I was younger, and just seeing that movie, I Walked the Line. So I guess maybe could be coming from there, just kind of seeing that and hearing Johnny Cash, and that kind of sparking an interest in seeing what this whole thing was about, and just discovering this whole outlaw, David Allan Coe and all that.
Yeah, it's kind of a shame that our other co-host Matt isn't here, because he was a radio host in small country towns in Australia for a very long time, and he's the one who actually got me onto good country music. He spent so much time listening to the terrible stuff. It's like, there's got to be better stuff out there. And yeah, he got really, really into the genre. He introduced me to a lot of good artists, and that started me looking down that pathway. But I think like this, what you're talking about before, like Luke Bryan, that I kind of classify that as like, like pickup truck country, like the working class, red, white, and blue country stuff. And that's the radio stuff. And that's the stuff I can't stand. Like,
well, to be fair, a lot of outlaw music is also about drinking whiskey.
Yeah.
Although there's more depth
that's
to
true.
it. I mean,
that's a common factor.
Country, I think it was like a documentary or something I watched where they basically just said, country is like the white man's blues, because that's what it came from. Like, country did come from blues music, and blues music was very, not necessarily simple, but it was very straightforward.
Dude, there's so many variations of blues that like came out.
That's another thing that I listen to every now and then, just like old blues stuff. Yeah, Howling Wolf, Lightning Hopkins, all
like
that.
Howling Wolf, that type of thing. Yeah, I love that stuff. There's some pretty good like new wave blues stuff out there as well. What's it called? Agnostic Mountain Choir, I think it's called. It's a really good modern blues act that I really like. I'll send you a link to that one as well.
I haven't really been able to
finish the interview from a couple of different genres.
I usually like to just go on, say, Bandcamp or something, and I'll go in like the metal tag or industrial tag or goth tag or whatever. And what I'll do is I will just click the thing where you see the newest releases instead of like the popular ones. And I'll just listen to all the stuff that's like released that day or that week, and just kind of see if I find something good, because I tend to be pretty vocal about supporting small artists. And the thing is, when I say small artists, I mean real small artists. I don't mean someone who has a decent budget from what may be an indie label and might be popular within a small scene, because that's a band that, you are already fairly established at that point. Like, yeah, you're still small, but you are known. So, I like to find the artists that just released like their first song or their first album or something like that. And, sometimes I'll, message them, get in touch with them, and maybe see if they want to do something, or, sometimes I will write reviews and do interviews for the site Sounds and Shadows. And if I like their album enough, then I will use Sounds and Shadows as a way to kind of give them some kind of exposure, either by doing a review or interviewing them, or maybe doing like a video premiere or whatever it might be. But these days I haven't been able to really find any new music, because I've been just so busy with just planning the next move for Carrion. Like, we've been in the process of writing another album, which that's of course a whole job in itself, and then it's all the other stuff that comes along with it, like, you know, artwork or planning music videos and all those types of things.
I totally get that. Because I mean, we try and do the exact same thing with our site. That's I always try to support the smaller artists that submit music to us directly, as opposed to, you know, stuff that gets sent by a bigger label, the PR firm backing them.
Oh, I know.
It's hard to do it sometimes just to find the time, because we get so many emails per week. But yeah, it's I mean, I reviewed something on the day that had like 6 likes on Facebook and no Instagram account, and they got the album out that week type thing. So, you know, like
there's so much
cool that
stuff
no one's heard
out there, because it's
just to put it out
easier
there.
to put out music, and on the negative side of it, there's a lot of shit, but there is still a lot of good stuff out there. But I guess just the music industry as a whole has just been crumbling for the past couple of decades, and no one really wants to take any risks anymore, other than maybe indie labels. But, you know, you can only go so far with them, and you can do the DIY thing, but you can only get so far doing that if you don't know what the fuck you're doing. So there's tons and tons of great bands that are doing just cool shit. It doesn't necessarily have to be that they're fucking reinventing the wheel, but, you know, just making something that's actually good instead of just mediocre or okay. But yeah, the problem is just there's just too much fucking stuff, and there just isn't enough time to get through all of it.
Yeah, we that's an interesting thing you said there, because we talked
I've heard of it, but I don't really know what it is.
Podcast or another like a podcast series that's online. They're like a really underground sort of extreme music podcast that we're close with one of their hosts. He actually came on our show. The episode's not out yet; it's in editing right now. But we did like a yearly wrap up for 2020, and for their wrap up, they divided the music into 2 categories, which was like artistic boundary pushing, so stuff that's like, you know, really interesting and out there, and then just doing music that's being done but really well. Yeah, and I think like that's kind of how you have to look at it. A band doesn't have to push the boundary if they take a classic
one
style
band
and do it
that
really
I discovered when I still had the time to just fuck around and look for new bands. I found this band from St. Louis called the Cult Sounds, and they do, you know, it's like a post-punk goth rock kind of thing, but you know, one of the several complaints that I have about this whole goth revival thing is that, first of all, where the fuck did the guitars go? I mean, goth music, at least in my opinion, grew out of the punk scene, and it's just nowadays it seems to be very I guess electronic centric, you could say. You know, there's like maybe 2 people and a synthesizer and a fuck ton of reverb on the vocals.
Yeah.
And so you have that side, or then you have this side that's just trying to be Sisters of Mercy. The Cult Sounds are a little bit younger. I think they're around the same age as I am. And I think because of that, they also grew up with different influences. You know, this is people who grew up listening to like anything from like AFI to you know, like more extreme like death and black metal stuff. And like you can hear that, you can hear those influences in the music, which just that alone is enough to kind of set it apart and give a new spin on things.
Yeah, you actually introduced me to them, both in music and their members.
They have a new album. I think it's finished.
Album coming out soon, I think
it's going to be called like The Death of a Star or something like that. I've actually heard some of the songs on it, and it's, you know, when, you know, they seem to have this thing where when a band can progress but without losing their sound. It's like they're not just repeating themselves, but when you hear it, like when that album comes out, whenever it comes out, like you will know who you're listening to, but it's not because that they're just regurgitating the same thing, which is kind of, one of the things that I think would be maybe like the goal of a musician, that you're able to retain your sound, but without having it result in stagnation, which is kind of what I try to do with Carrion, where, we released an album maybe 2 years ago now, and like that compared to Testament of the Exiled is different, but you can probably tell that it is the same thing. And the new stuff that I'm working on now, that's going to be on the next album, that's that same thing again, where you kind of take a leap away from what you did, but you're not straying like way too far off the path.
Yeah, I definitely agree. That's where you kind of get that thing where people say a band's sold out. I think that's when they change their sound so drastically that it doesn't even resemble them as a band anymore.
If you change your sound, you sold out. If you don't change your sound, and that's fucking bad too. So it's like you can't win. And, there's very few bands out there who can more or less stay the same without it just turning to shit. Motorhead did that. They had their sound. When they released a new album, you knew what to expect. Like, you knew you were getting Motorhead, but it worked for them because it just, I don't know, some bands can just do that, like Motorhead or Slayer, except for that one album, or AC/DC, for example. Like, there are bands who can do that, but it's very few bands.
And then you have bands that change completely and people like it still, like Ulver. I absolutely love Ulver.
Yeah,
and they started as a black metal band,
even something like I mentioned,
AFI.
They started out as like just a straight up punk band, and then suddenly they're doing this like really dramatic, like theatrical rock music, and just all this, like every fucking album is just completely different, and then people still like it.
And there's other bands like Sanail as well. Started as like a black metal band, then became sort of like gothic industrial electronic stuff, and then they changed back again to be sort of like bring back some of the black metal stuff again.
It's like
I like that.
Whenever
they can change their sound so much, and people are still like,
whenever people, I guess, like a magazine or whatever it might be, a website or something, they're like making a post about Carrion, for example, and it's like, oh, industrial band. And like, you're not wrong, but there are also, like, there's a ballad on Testament of the Exiled. There's more rock-centric stuff. There's a song that's more like a fast-paced, almost metal kind of thing. Like, it is industrial. Like, all of those songs do have that element to it, but it isn't, like, I think, like, at least in my opinion, the only like true industrial song on the entire Testament of the Exiled album is probably The Blood of Saints. It's just, it's also ironically the only song, as far as I can remember, that is made entirely electronically. There's a part in that song that people tend to mistake for guitars, but it is actually just a synth. But like, that's a thing that I've kind of been getting into lately. As I got into, modular synths, I also got more into just the idea of sound design. So I've been kind of playing around with, using instruments in ways that aren't necessarily the conventional way, like using a guitar more as a sound design tool instead of just playing it as a guitar, or trying to make synths sound like a guitar, just weird little things like that. Just keeps it interesting for myself, really, because it'd be really fucking boring if I just sat down and played the same goddamn power chords all the time.
What do you mean? Tremolo, riffs, and blast beats is all you need to make music. Speaking of interesting albums, I don't know if you've heard of them, but have you heard of a band called Carrion? They brought out an album on, I think it was like last week. I reviewed them, but I've been following that band for years, and they've always changed their sound and stuff, but they've always kind of been a blend between black metal, like hardcore and kind of screamo stuff. But their last album was chiptune and 8-bit, and then it was the weirdest album, and it's one of the best things I've heard in a very long time. They kept the black metal vocals, but they made the music chiptune and lo-fi 8-bit, and brought in like hip hop beats, and then some random post-hardcore clean vocals, and it was like the weirdest mix of music, but I absolutely love it.
You know, sometimes it can.
So yeah, I thought that's
go
super
well,
cool that they can just do that. Like, yeah, why not? I was super nervous when I heard what they'd done, but they actually pulled it off. You know, I mean, it can go either way really quickly. Fans can be like, "This is ridiculous. Yeah. Why have you done this?"
Right.
Or they can be like, "Oh, that's really cool that you guys decided to completely put it out there." So, Brendan, did you have any more of those questions of yours, or was that the last one that you had? Is there anything else you wanted to talk about while you're on Hide,
that we are working on another album, and I probably can't say too much about it, but I think right now the idea is that we will try to put out the first single in a couple of months around May. So that's something to look forward to, I suppose. As I mentioned, you know, it's going to be, it's not going to be Testament of the Exiled Part 2. It's going to be kind of a progression from that. And from just judging from the songs that we have right now, it seems like, you know, you mentioned blast beats. Well, it's probably going to be a little heavier, darker, weirder, possibly. So yeah, I guess that would kind of be the only thing. Other than that, we do still have some tapes available of the revised edition, which for anyone who doesn't know, they were limited to just 50 copies. It's, you know, once it's gone for good, that kind of deal. So yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all that's going on right now, at least the things that I can say.
Well, nice. Thank you so much for coming on. It's been really good chatting. Had some interesting topics come up. So
yeah, thank you.
We'd be happy to have you on again sometime once the new album's out to talk about that one as well. So yeah, thank you. Okay, for everyone listening, thanks for tuning in, and we'll see you next time.